At exactly 2:37 p.m. on a Friday in late October, the gym doors at Cold Ridge High School were quietly locked from the inside. It wasn't unusual for the football players to linger behind after the pep rally rehearsals. No one questioned it. The cheer squad had already finished their final routine, and most of the staff had cleared out for the weekend. But inside that gym, 3 boys, Connor McVeigh, Jake Larson, and Brett Tolson, stood shoulder to shoulder, blocking the exit. In Jake's hand was a pair of industrial hair clippers taken from the janitor's office. In Brett's, a phone set to record. In Connor's eyes, a quiet dare. Do something. And in the middle of the room, Amara Jackson, new girl, transfer student, scholarship recipient, stood alone in her uniform, ponytail neatly tied, back straight. She was outnumbered, unarmed, and completely surrounded. But she didn't move. She didn't flinch. She waited. What happened next was only 37 seconds long. 37 seconds that would later be viewed over 4 million times in a single weekend. 37 seconds that would fracture a town, unravel an institution, and expose a string of ignored complaints, buried emails, and settled lawsuits stretching back almost 2 decades. The camera caught the moment they lunged. It caught the clipper cord being yanked from the wall, the first strands of hair falling to the floor. It caught Amara's right leg as it spun through the air with the precision of someone who had spent years perfecting the movement. But the camera didn't capture the whole truth. It didn't show what led up to that moment. It didn't reveal the teachers who turned their backs, the superintendent's quiet warnings, or the reason Amara's mother pulled her out of school 2 years earlier after filing a report that went nowhere. It didn't show the system. Not yet. And before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. If you fight for justice and you think the Bullies has no rights to humiliate the girl, hit the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. But if you think they have every right to humiliate her without cause, comment your thoughts below. And don't forget to share the video to those who also fights for justice. What happened inside that gymnasium was never supposed to be seen. It was meant to scare her, humiliate her, remind her of where she stood in the invisible hierarchy that governed every locker room, hallway, and cafeteria in that district. But Amara Jackson had grown up on the south side of Atlanta. Her uncles were instructors at a local self-defense studio. Her aunt, a retired policewoman, had taught her to memorize badge numbers before she could legally drive. She had been conditioned to recognize threats before they revealed themselves. And while she hadn't expected to need that training again, not after the move, not in a quiet town like Cold Ridge, it returned to her without hesitation. When Brett raised the phone, she didn't cower. She stepped forward. When Jake reached for her ponytail, she moved. 37 seconds. It was all over. Except it wasn't. Not by a long shot. And what happened next would make national headlines. I didn't move from that gym floor for a long time after it happened. Even after the noise had stopped, after the echo of those clippers being kicked across the floor had faded into the corners of the bleachers, I just stood there breathing hard, trying to understand if I'd really done what I'd been trained my whole life not to do in front of white folks. I remember the scuff marks on the floor where my sneakers slid. I remember the silence that came after Jake hit the wall and didn't get up. I remember Brett dropping the phone, screen cracked, still recording, because for the first time in his life, he wasn't in control. And I remember how cold that gym felt, like every window had been left open, even though it was October and every door was supposed to be closed. That's what fear does. It makes everything colder than it is. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because it was too familiar, too expected. You move into a new town, new school, walk into a room with a ponytail too high, a voice too steady, and you already know who's gonna try you. It don't matter how nice you are, or how quiet, or how much your mama tells you to just get through it. Cold Ridge felt like a clean start. That's what they promised us. Said the school was safe. Said the district had 0 tolerance. They didn't tell us 0 tolerance depended on whose daddy sat on the school board, or who had a last name carved into the stadium bench, or who got invited to the superintendent's barbecue. I hadn't even been at that school 2 full months, and already I could feel it. In the way the teachers looked past me when I raised my hand. In the way the guidance counselor called me girl instead of my name. In the way they let Jake walk around with his jersey still clean after knocking over that freshman by the lockers like no one saw it. But I saw it. Every single thing they let slide, every warning sign, every bruise somebody else had to hide because telling would only make it worse. That school didn't run on discipline, it ran on silence, and still even now I ask myself, why me? Why'd they come for me that day? What did I do, besides show up and refuse to shrink? Was it the way I stood during practice? Was it the fact that I made varsity after one tryout? Was it because I smiled too wide? Because I didn't laugh at their jokes? Or was it something even simpler? Like the fact that I was new, I was alone, and I was black? What I know now, and didn't know then, is that it had nothing to do with who I was, and everything to do with what I represented. They didn't want someone like me in that uniform. They didn't want someone like me standing next to their sisters at halftime. Someone whose mother worked 2 jobs. Someone who didn't have a last name they recognized. Cold Ridge wasn't about school spirit. It was about control. And the second I showed up, the second I didn't play small, I became a problem they needed to fix. But what none of them knew, not the principal, not the cheer coach, not even those boys, was that my mama didn't raise me to be afraid. She raised me to be aware, to be ready. Every Sunday after church, I trained. While other girls were getting their nails done or going to the mall, I was on the mat learning how to fall without breaking, how to strike without hesitating. I didn't do it for show. I did it for survival. Because in this country, when you look like me, danger don't come with a warning. It comes with a smirk, a badge, a uniform, a pair of clippers. And so when they circled me, I didn't freeze. I remembered everything my auntie taught me, everything I never wanted to use, but had to. Because there was no teacher coming through that door. There was no grown-up rushing in to say, enough. Just me. And the sound of that cord ripping out of the wall. Now everybody wants to talk about what happened after. The news, the footage, the protests. But nobody wants to talk about before. About the years of complaints from other girls that were ignored. About the Spanish teacher who quit quietly after she walked in on Connor pushing another student in the hallway. About the janitor who found a bloody pom-pom in the trash and got told to mind his business. Nobody wants to ask the hard questions. Why did they target her? Why did no teachers intervene? And how did a high school assault expose an entire school district scandal? Because what happened to me wasn't just about 3 boys in a gym. It was about what the school protected, what it allowed, what it covered up, and who it sacrificed to keep things looking normal. My name is Amara Jackson, and I didn't start this war, but I'm sure as hell gonna finish it. I didn't want to leave Atlanta. That house on Auburn Avenue held more than just walls. It held my mama's laughter, deep, throaty, the kind that warmed a room. It held our history, her perfume still stuck in the curtains, her gospel humming echoing down the hallways. That city raised me. Every corner had a story. Every crack in the sidewalk meant something. So when the cancer came fast and quiet, like smoke slipping under a door, and I stood in that hospital room listening to machines hum while she took her last breath, part of me stayed there, in that room, in that moment, numb. After the funeral, I went to live with Auntie Denise. She'd always said if anything happened to my mama, she'd step in. I used to think she was just saying that, the way folks talk at cookouts, hands full of ribs and good intentions. But she meant it. She packed up everything, moved to Cold Ridge, some small town in the middle of nowhere that looked like it had been frozen in time since 1996. And she did it all for me. Said I needed a fresh start. Said it'd be good to get away from the memories. But what she didn't understand is, when grief wraps itself around your bones, it follows you. Doesn't matter how far you run. First time I walked through the doors of Cold Ridge High, I knew I didn't belong. It wasn't anything loud. That's the thing about places like that. It ain't the shouting, it's the silence. The way eyes skim over you like your background noise. The way conversations pause when you walk past. The way a teacher calls roll and stumbles on your name like it's too heavy for their tongue. Nobody said, "Go back to where you came from," but they didn't have to. It was in the way they looked at me when I spoke up in class. It was in the way Connor brushed my shoulder too hard in the hallway and kept walking like I didn't matter. And I kept telling myself, just make it through. Just get to graduation. Just keep your head down. But that was never me. Even when I tried to disappear, my presence was too loud for their comfort. I'd been doing martial arts since I was 5. Mama said I came out the womb swinging. First it was Taekwondo, then Jiu-Jitsu, then Capoeira. By the time I turned 12, I was training with a youth program run by ex-Olympians down in College Park. I wasn't trying to go pro. I just needed somewhere to put all that emotion, all that fire. Every kick, every stance, every breath, it taught me control, discipline. But most of all, it taught me how to take up space. Real space. And in a town like Coldridge, a black girl taking up space is a threat. The cheerleading tryouts were my auntie's idea. She thought it'd help me find community. I didn't want to wear no skirt and smile for boys with crew cuts and championship rings, but I went. I didn't just go. I showed out, tumbling past clean, stunts locked in, jumps higher than any of the returning girls. I wasn't trying to make enemies. I was just doing what I'd always done. Give everything or don't show up at all. When the results got posted and I saw my name at the top of the list, co-captain, I knew it wasn't over. I felt it. In the way Jake's girlfriend looked at me from across the quad. In the way the other girls went silent whenever I entered the locker room. I wasn't supposed to be that good. I wasn't supposed to be better. I was supposed to be grateful, humble, quiet. A diversity win, not a competitor. But what they didn't understand was, I didn't survive Atlanta just to shrink for Coldridge. Still, the loneliness hit hard. Every day felt like walking a tightrope with no net. I'd eat lunch by myself, earphones in, pretending I didn't hear the whispers. Why she talk like that? Think she better than everybody? Her mama probably on welfare. I'd hear it in the girls' locker room, in the bathroom stalls, outside the gym after practice. And the teachers, they looked the other way. Pretended they didn't hear what they heard, see what they saw. 'Cause protecting me meant confronting the truth, that their perfect little town was rotting from the inside. But I wasn't just hated for my talent. It was my confidence, my stillness, my refusal to beg for their approval. That's what made them uncomfortable. Jake's girlfriend, Brielle, she said it with her eyes every time I hit a stunt higher than hers. Every time the coach praised my timing. Every time the boys looked a little too long in the cafeteria. I wasn't just a new girl. I was a mirror. And she didn't like what she saw. I started noticing little things. My water bottle missing after practice. My name misspelled on the cheer flyer. Whispers that the coach was playing favorites. But none of that prepared me for what came next. That Friday in October wasn't random. It was planned. Everything down to the minute. They waited until they knew I'd be alone. Knew the coach would be gone. Knew I'd be changing after practice. Jake, Brett, Connor, they were always together. Always laughing at things that weren't funny. And that day, they didn't laugh. They locked the gym doors, pulled out those clippers, and in their eyes, it wasn't just about humiliating me. It was about breaking me. But what they didn't know was, you can't break someone who's already walked through fire. When I stood there, my back against that gym wall, my fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palm, I remembered everything my mama told me. You don't back down, you don't freeze, you survive. And I did more than survive. I fought back. And in doing so, I exposed more than just 3 boys' cruelty. I peeled back the layers of an entire town built on silence, a school that protected athletes over victims, a system that looked the other way when girls cried in bathrooms and pretended it was just drama. That was the day everything changed. But change don't come easy. Not in places like Cold Ridge. I remember that Friday afternoon like a wound that never fully healed. Every detail etched into my memory, vivid and raw. The bleachers stood empty, echoing with the quiet hum of the overhead lights. My heart thudded as I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear and closed my eyes for a moment, steadying myself. The pep rally was over, the lights dimmed, and my teammates had left, hugging each other and laughing on their way to the parking lot. I was alone in that cavernous gym, ankle deep in the echo of footsteps and silence. I felt the tension in my muscles, a mix of exhaustion and a slight thrill, like the moment right before a storm breaks. Then they came in. Connor, Jake, Brett, walking toward me with that slow, deliberate stride that chills your blood. I heard the clipper cord snapping against the floor when Brett unplugged it and felt a ripple of dread. My breath caught in my throat as the gym doors clicked shut behind them. I realized they weren't just walking in, they were closing me in. My muscles tensed and my limbs froze. My instincts screamed, "Run!" But the layout offered no escape, not under the bleachers, not through the double doors. They cornered me near the sideline, lights focusing on us like spotlights in a theater built for confrontation. They backed me up until my heel hit the dusty yellow line that marked the basketball court's edge. My pulse pounded in my ears. I could almost hear the crowd of no one waiting to see what would happen. I felt breath on my neck as Connor leaned forward, said something I couldn't make out. I smelled the faint scent of bleach and sweat and cheap cologne, the scent of entitlement. When Brett clicked the clippers on, the low buzz grew loud in that empty space. I felt the world shortening. I felt danger. Then it happened. I don't know who lunged first, but I remember the hair, my hair being yanked, the clippers scraping against flesh and rubber. They had me pressed against the floor, 2 hands on either side of my arms, my back curved like a broken bow. And in that moment I saw it. The look on their faces, more excitement than fear. They thought they'd won. They thought I'd stay down. But I didn't. I waited. I felt the cold wood of the bleachers press into my shoulder blade. I tasted adrenaline, bitter and sweet. I let my body coil. And just as Brett turned away to gloat, thinking he'd done enough, I struck. My heel swung, tight and precise, and connected with his jaw. Crack. It echoed like thunder in the emptiness. Time slowed. I spun on one heel, and the clipper flew from Connor's hand, skidding across the floor in a sick mockery of the fight. And so did he, thrown off balance, chest first against the bleacher seats. Everything blurred for a second. The buzzing of the clippers, Brett's shaking head, the straining lights overhead. Then both of them hit the floor, stunned. And there I was, standing, bruised, wired, breathing heavy. The clippers lay useless between us like a broken weapon. I held my breath as silence roared inside that gym. And then I heard it. A door banging open, footsteps rushing in, but too late. Too late for them. Too late for the threat. But not too late for what came next. Because this moment didn't end with the fight. It ended with consequences. The video leaked within hours. Cameras caught the whole thing. The clipper in midair, Brett's stunned expression, me, chest heaving, gleaming under the light. It blew up online faster than any scandal before it. 4 million views in 3 days. National news, interviews. Armchair warriors picking sides from halfway across the country. But the real shock wasn't the footage. It was what I said at the hearing. I remember the days that followed like a slow-burning ember in my chest. Constant heat, constant ache. The school suspended me, and on paper, that made me the bad actor. The boys, the privileged trio, were given probation. No suspension, no real consequence. They got to keep their records clean, their futures intact, like nothing really happened. That sting wasn't about fairness. It was about power, as if the rules only applied to me. In the hallways, tension cracked like lightning in summer. Posters went up, "Free Amara" scrawled in charcoal on construction paper taped to lockers. Friends whispered support between classes. Strangers offered nods of respect. Local protests ignited. High school kids, parents, Black Lives Matter signs. People I didn't know cared more than the adults paid to protect me. I felt grief and gratitude intertwine, like a vine you can't untwist. Then the investigation began. I found out through Auntie Denise over tear-soaked cereal bowls that my name had popped up in other girls' stories too. A freshman shoved in the hall. A classmate whose locker was ransacked. A whisper from a senior who said she'd tried to report a teacher who looked the other way while Connor shoved her into a locker. But none of those complaints mattered. They were lost files, forgotten complaints. Probation paid off. That's what I realized. The system didn't fail us. It chose to. My lawyer filed a FOIA request for internal district emails. That's when it got real. The emails showed an unmistakable pattern. Scheduling changes just before tryouts, private meetings between coaches and Connor's dad, the state senator, a junior board member reminding the principal, "Keep this quiet. Allies are watching." Another said, "We can't let this go to press." And the cleanup crew, guidance counselors deleting incident reports, janitors ordered to toss evidence. Every line cut the same. Institutional protectiveness, not toward the students, but toward reputations and egos. Then came the false lead. A teacher, Ms. Hargrove, claimed she never saw anything that day. Again and again under oath. I heard nothing. No shouting. No screams. She looked me dead in the eye. And then in court, my lawyer produced a voice memo, an old phone recording from that day. A teenage voice trembling, whispering, "They're doing it again. They locked her in." That audio tore her off the stand. The legal team realized the pattern of betrayals, cover-ups. Someone was complicit. And I felt relief. But that relief came with a cost. When secrets are pulled from the dark, light burns. I watched adults get red-faced, embarrassed. I watched school board members shift seats in their chairs. I watched grown men try to look tough as they remembered being powerless in front of a crowd. And I stood in that fire, grieving what I'd lost. My innocence, my faith, my trust, and knowing something had to change. That grassroots energy, kids, moms, coaches from other schools pushed harder. They flooded school board meetings. They taped petitions to the offices of local politicians. They quoted the emails. They demanded justice. And what I learned, this wasn't just about me. It was about every girl who never got a microphone. Every student who had to sit next to a bully at lunch because no one believed them. Every black kid who learned early that fairness wasn't for them. I became the spark, but the fire was ready to burn. And still, the hardest confession came when I realized what I'd lost to come this far. Because even as I stood up, they tried to make me pay. My grades faltered under the stress. My cheer coach told me quietly, "Maybe you should step down." Pressure mounted from home. The town divided. Auntie worried about threats. The senator dad quietly pulled strings to keep me from college scouts. Everything I worked for threatened to unravel. But I held firm. Because this moment was too big for me to back down now. I don't remember how I got into my aunt's car that night. I only remember the flashing cameras and the roar in my ears, like 1,000 people had broken in at once. When the hidden audio file was released, captured begrudgingly by my cheer captain, it broke open the whole thing. I heard Jake's voice, low and arrogant through the clip. "No one's gonna believe her over us anyway." Just 4 words, but they carried the weight of every conversation that followed. Every story that was swept under the rug. Every system that chose winners over the truth. In that moment, my stomach twisted. That voice pulled back the curtain. I wasn't fighting 3 boys anymore. I was up against every teacher who looked away, every school board member who turned a blind eye, every adult who thought it was easier to preserve reputations than protect children. The town shifted that night. I could feel it. A collective inhale followed by a pouring exhale of disbelief. Headlines flashed across screens nationwide. The audio file went viral. Lawmakers had to respond. The FBI announced a civil rights investigation. My voice, steady, determined, reverberated in courtrooms and newsrooms I'd only seen on TV. I filed a lawsuit against the district for negligence and racial bias. But it wasn't just for me. I was suing for every girl whose whispers were ignored, and for the spirit of a community that insisted things remained fine, no matter who got hurt. The deepest twist came when I dug into my mother's past. The same school district, same town 30 years ago. I found yearbook photos blurred with her voice, a whisper in the archives about girls whose hair was cut, reputations destroyed, lives derailed. She'd reported it, insisted teachers protect her girls, but she was silenced. No investigation followed, no apology, just another cruel system choosing neatness over justice. When I watched that, looked at the lines under my mama's eyes in old photos, I felt my heart break and rebuild all at once. This wasn't just me. It was history. Standing at that mic, I said something I'd never dared admit inside that gym. It wasn't just my ponytail they cut. They tried to erase who I was. That sentence carried everything: grief, shadowed lineage, defiance. It was the clearest moment of my life. The world wasn't ready for the kind of quiet power I carried, but I stepped into it anyway. In the courtroom under bright lights I felt fear. The fear of being unmasked. The fear of losing everything. But I also felt fierce love creeping in my bones. Love for my mama who raised me strong. For Auntie Denise who kept me safe. For the unknown girls before me who never got their stories heard. That twist, learning I wasn't alone, gave me strength. Because sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we didn't know we inherited. Sometimes our truth is our weapon. And in that moment, the real fight began. The fight to show my face, to make them believe, to make them see that my story, and the stories before me, weren't accidents. They were warnings, and they deserved to be heard. I felt the weight of every day leading up to that courtroom like a stone in my chest. Sometimes it felt I couldn't breathe. Other days it felt I couldn't blink. Then came the day Brett stood in front of the judge. I saw him hesitate as he looked at me, whole worlds behind his eyes. And when he spoke, his apology wasn't rehearsed. It cracked with guilt and release. He and Connor had been pushed, shamed, prodded by Jake. He said he didn't know how to stop it, that he wished he had. Hearing that, I thought about every night I lay awake replaying the moment of impact, over and over. I thought about how easy it would have been if someone had spoken up. And in Brett's voice I heard possibility. The possibility of someone choosing truth even when it crushed them inside. Jake lost everything that morning. The school board expelled him, stripped him of captainship, erased his cheerleading scholarships and removed his name from the roster. Watching his face go blank, I felt an echo of victory, but mostly a flood of sorrow for what he could have been. This wasn't about retribution. This was about making sure what happened to me couldn't be passed down again. Then there was the big moment, when the verdict came down. My heart didn't thunder, it blipped, a quiet, surprised blip, as if my body was shocked by relief. I won. The district was held responsible. New leadership was brought in. The school board dissolved. Emails were deleted. Seat warmers fired or replaced. Everything that protected those boys was dismantled. What I didn't expect was the river of support that followed. College letters poured in. Scouts from Ivy and state schools alike offered scholarships for athletics and academic promise. I read those letters at night while Auntie Denise and I cried quietly in the dark. I thought I wanted a school far away, an escape. But I stayed. I chose a nonprofit focused on teaching self-defense in underfunded schools. Not because I loved lecturing, but because I wanted to see the moment students stood in their own power. I wanted to be the person who showed up early, stayed late, refused to look away. The hardest part was forgiveness. I thought winning would let me walk away, but healing didn't work that way. I still carry weight. The memory of the Clippers, the faces frozen in shock, the way the building smelled like fear. I carry it, but I don't let it define me. I carry it to teach, to remind me. Every time a girl stands up for herself, she reshapes the world just a little. I learned that justice isn't just punishment. Sometimes, it's preventing the next girl from getting hurt. So that's the story. My story. From Atlanta grief to Cold Ridge fury. From silencing shame to courtroom truth. From national headlines to grassroots healing. I didn't just fight for me. I fought for every voice that got cut down before I screamed. And if you've ever felt small, unseen, or silent, I hope you hear this. Your voice matters. Your strength does too. Stand up. Speak out. Don't wait for someone to give you permission. Because sometimes justice isn't a verdict. It's the courage to keep standing. You know, I still sit with it all. The echoes. The silence before the scream. The way the gym smelled like cheap deodorant and old wood. And how the lights above flickered like they were nervous too. Some things don't leave you. But over time, they change shape. What used to haunt me now reminds me of what I survived, of what I reclaimed, of what I refused to let die inside me. I tell this story not because I want attention. I tell it because I remember what it felt like to be 17 and standing alone in a town that didn't see me and didn't want to. I remember how it felt when grown adults decided silence was easier than truth, when my pain became inconvenient, when justice felt like a word folks only used when it suited them. But I also remember the moment it changed. Not in the courtroom. Not even when the video went viral. It changed when I looked in the mirror after it all. Hair uneven, heart broken open. And I whispered to myself, "You're still here. You made it." And now I gotta ask you something real. Would you have fought back like Amara? Would you have waited for help or become it? Have you ever felt invisible until you made yourself seen? Have you ever swallowed your truth just to keep peace that never served you? And if you have, then I need you to know, you ain't alone. Your pain is not a burden. Your voice ain't too loud. You deserve to be heard. You deserve to be safe. You deserve to exist without shrinking. So, let me ask again. What would you have done in her shoes? Let us know in the comments. Because these ain't just stories, they're lived lives. And sometimes the thing that changes the world ain't a law or a headline. It's a shared truth, a comment, a moment of being seen. And if you felt something in this story, if it stirred something in you, then do one more thing. Hit that subscribe button. Because this is just one story. But there are more like hers, and we won't stop telling them. We'll keep the light on for the next one, for the next Amara, for the next truth waiting to be heard. Next week, a janitor finds a hidden notebook in a locker and exposes a cheating scandal that goes all the way to the school board. It's deeper than you think. We'll see you then.